A stock just did something that stock markets almost never do. It jumped over 500% in a single day. Not 5%, not 50%, over 500. If you had put money into this company in the morning, by the time trading closed that same afternoon, your money would have grown more than 5 times over. That kind of jump almost never happens in big, serious markets. It happens in tiny, risky bets, not in a company that makes one of the most boring, ordinary parts found inside almost every electronic device on Earth. This happened in Shanghai. A company most people outside the chip industry had never heard of walked onto the stock market that morning like any other new company. Nothing about the opening price looked unusual. Investors were watching. Analysts were doing their normal morning routine, and then trading began. Within the first hour, the price started climbing so fast that the stock exchange had to pause trading more than once, just to slow things down. Every time trading started again, the price kept climbing anyway. By the end of the day, this one company had become worth more than almost any other public company in mainland China. More valuable than some of the biggest names people actually recognize. Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't a flashy phone app or trendy social media company. This was a company that makes memory chips, the small, unglamorous parts that sit quietly inside your phone, your laptop, your car, and the massive computer warehouses running artificial intelligence right now. Nobody throws a party for memory chips. Nobody lines up outside a store to buy one. And yet, on this one morning, investors treated this company like it was the most exciting thing on the planet. If you're finding this interesting so far, tap that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. And hit subscribe so you don't miss what this company is planning next. Because, trust me, the story is just getting started. Here's the part that really matters, though. This wasn't some overnight miracle built on hype and empty promises. Behind that single trading day was a company that had already been quietly building real factories, hiring real engineers, and shipping real products for years. The investors pouring money in weren't gambling on a dream. They were placing a serious bet on a company that had already proven it could compete, and compete hard, in one of the most difficult and most guarded industries in the world. For a very long time, this industry was controlled by just a small handful of companies, mostly based in South Korea and the United States. They held onto almost the entire global supply of this type of chip for decades. Nobody expected that to change anytime soon. The costs to even attempt entering this market are enormous. The technology takes years to master, and multiple companies from other countries had already tried and failed. So when a company from China suddenly became worth more than almost anyone imagined, it wasn't just a stock market surprise. It was a signal that the old rules of this industry might be starting to break. So what exactly does this company make, and why did the market react like this was the biggest thing to happen in years? To really understand why the single trading day sent shockwaves through the entire chip industry, you first need to understand what this chip actually does, why almost every piece of modern technology depends on it, and why so few companies have ever been able to make it at scale. That's exactly where we're headed next. Picture your brain for a second. Not the part that stores old memories from years ago, but the part you use right now, in this exact moment, to think, to focus, to hold a thought in your head while you finish a sentence. That fast, active, in-the-moment thinking space is basically what this chip does for a computer. It's not where information gets stored forever. It's where information gets used right now, at incredible speed, so everything on your screen feels instant instead of slow and clunky. Think about what happens when you open 10 browser tabs at once and jump between them without anything freezing. Or when you're playing a game and a new area loads in half a second instead of 10. Or when you switch from one app to another on your phone and it picks up exactly where you left off. None of that happens by magic. Every single time, this chip is working quietly in the background, holding onto exactly what your device needs at that exact moment, so nothing lags and nothing crashes. It's not flashy, it's not something companies put on a billboard. But without it, every device you own would feel painfully slow or simply wouldn't work at all. Now here's where it gets bigger than just your phone. The entire artificial intelligence boom that everyone's talking about right now runs on the same type of chip, just at a massive scale. When a company trains a huge AI model, it's not just using raw processing power. It's constantly pulling information in and out at mind-bending speed, over and over, billions of times. The more advanced AI gets, the more of this chip it needs. Not a little more, a lot more. Every new AI data center being built right now needs enormous amounts of it. Every cloud company expanding its servers needs more of it. Every AI startup training a new model needs more of it. This isn't a niche product anymore. It's one of the most in-demand pieces of technology on the entire planet, and demand keeps climbing faster than anyone expected. So this chip is everywhere. It's in your car, your phone, your laptop, your smart home gadgets, and every major data center on Earth. That's exactly why what happened next is so surprising. For more than 20 years, almost this entire global supply came from just 3 companies. 2 based in South Korea, 1 based in the United States. Together, these 3 companies controlled around 95% of the entire world's supply of this chip. 95%. Think about how extreme that actually is. Imagine if just 3 bakeries controlled 95% of all the bread made on the entire planet. You'd probably assume something was seriously wrong with that picture. But in the chip world, this level of control was treated as completely normal and honestly unavoidable. The reason nobody challenged it for so long is simple. Building the factories needed to make these chips costs billions of dollars. The technology takes decades to fully master. The equipment involved is so precise, it can carve patterns smaller than a virus onto a tiny piece of material. Because of that, very few companies ever even attempted to compete. And the ones that tried mostly failed. A company in Japan tried and eventually went bankrupt. A company in Germany tried and collapsed. A company in Taiwan tried and had to massively scale back its plans. Every failed attempt reinforced the same unspoken rule across the entire industry. Don't even try to compete with the big 3. You'll lose, and you'll lose big. For years, that's exactly how the industry stayed. China, despite being one of the largest buyers of these chips on the planet, had almost no domestic supply of its own. Every phone factory, every server farm, every electronics company across the country depended on chips built somewhere else. Priced however the big 3 decided to price them. Nobody in the industry seriously believed that was going to change anytime soon. But quietly, behind the scenes, one Chinese company had already started working on changing exactly that. And what they did next is the part almost nobody in the industry saw coming. Here's something that should sound impossible. Building a real, competitive chip company from nothing usually takes decades. Samsung spent over 40 years becoming a memory chip giant. The American competitor in this space has been at it since the late 1970s. These aren't companies that grew fast. They grew slow, brick by brick, generation by generation, over a lifetime. So when a company barely 10 years old walked onto the stock market and became one of the most valuable companies in an entire country, people in the industry didn't just call it impressive. They called it borderline unbelievable. This company started as a small operation back in 2016. At the time, almost nobody outside a small circle of engineers and government planners paid it any attention. It wasn't chasing headlines. It wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was simply trying to survive in an industry where survival alone was considered a long shot. And that long shot was very real. Other countries had already tried to build something similar and watched it fall apart. A company in Japan poured everything into competing in this exact market and eventually went bankrupt. A company in Germany tried the same thing and collapsed not long after. Another attempt out of Taiwan had to shrink its ambitions dramatically just to stay alive. Every single one of those failures sent the same message across the industry. This market crushes newcomers. Don't bother trying. So how did this one succeed where so many others failed? The answer isn't some secret breakthrough or a miracle piece of technology nobody else had. The answer is almost the opposite. Instead of trying to build the most advanced, most impressive chip in the world right out of the gate, this company made a very different choice. It focused on building chips that were simply good enough, not the fastest, not the most efficient, not something that would win awards for cutting-edge design. Just reliable, functional, and most importantly, cheap enough that price-sensitive buyers would choose it over the expensive, top-tier alternatives. That decision sounds almost too simple to matter, but it turned out to be the exact strategy that let this company survive its earliest, most fragile years. Instead of trying to take on the giants head-on in the most demanding, most competitive corner of the market, it quietly built a foothold in the areas nobody else wanted to fight over. Budget electronics, everyday consumer devices, products where absolute top performance wasn't the priority, but a lower price definitely was. And once that foothold was secure, the company didn't stay there. Year after year, it kept improving. It brought in engineers with experience from South Korea, Taiwan, and the United States. It reinvested heavily into research. It expanded its factories and pushed its production capacity higher and higher until what started as a scrappy, underfunded challenger had quietly grown into a real manufacturer shipping real products at real scale. Behind all of this was another piece of the puzzle that can't be ignored. This wasn't a company building its rise entirely alone. It had serious backing from its home government, which had made building a domestic chip industry a top national priority years earlier. That backing wasn't some hidden secret. It was openly discussed in national planning strategies. Loans, infrastructure support, and policy incentives were funneled toward companies exactly like this one, all built around one core idea. If the country's chip supply ever got cut off from the outside world, it needed the ability to keep running on its own. By the time this company was ready to go public, it wasn't a risky startup anymore. It was a fully operating manufacturer with factories running, products shipping, and a track record investors could actually point to. That's a big part of why the stock market reacted the way it did. People weren't betting on some far-off dream. They were betting on a company that had already proven it could do the thing everyone assumed was nearly impossible. But here's where the story gets even bigger. This company's timing wasn't just lucky. It landed right in the middle of the biggest technology boom happening anywhere on the planet right now, and that connection is about to make this story a whole lot more important than one country's stock market. Right now, every major tech company on Earth is racing to build smarter artificial intelligence, and almost nobody talks about the part of that race that actually matters most behind the scenes. It's not just about who has the smartest AI model or the flashiest new app. It's about who controls the chips that make all of that possible in the first place. And that's exactly where this company's rise stops being a simple business story and starts becoming something much bigger. Training a modern AI system isn't just about raw computing power. It requires moving massive amounts of information in and out of memory over and over at speeds that are almost hard to imagine. Every new AI model needs more of this memory than the one before it. Every new data center being built right now needs huge amounts of it just to function. Every cloud company expanding its servers needs more of it. So when a company that makes exactly this kind of chip suddenly becomes one of the most valuable companies in an entire country, with billions of dollars in fresh money to expand even further, that's not just good news for one company's investors. That's a shift in who controls one of the most important resources behind the entire AI boom. And this is where things get serious on a much bigger scale. For the past several years, the United States has tried to slow down this exact kind of progress through trade restrictions and export controls, hoping to keep advanced chip-making technology out of reach. The idea was simple. Without access to the best equipment, the thinking went, catching up would take far too long to matter. But what happened with this company's stock market debut tells a very different story. Restrictions didn't stop progress. If anything, they may have pushed this country to work even harder, invest even more, and build its own path forward instead of waiting for permission from anyone else. So what happens from here? A few things seem very likely. First, expect this company to expand fast. That fresh pile of investment money isn't going to sit untouched in a bank account. It's going straight into new factories, more equipment, and more engineers, all aimed at producing more chips and selling them at prices the big three companies will struggle to match. Undercutting on price is the oldest trick in the book for a challenger trying to steal market share, and this company now has the money to do exactly that. Second, expect a reaction from the countries that built their power around controlling this industry for so long. Policymakers who assumed this kind of catch-up was years, maybe decades away, now have to rethink that assumption fast. That could mean tighter restrictions, more pressure on allied countries to join in, or a bigger push to build up domestic chip production at home instead of relying on control from a distance. Third, keep an eye on the original three companies that have dominated this industry for over 20 years. They've never really had to deal with a serious fourth competitor before, especially not one backed by this much fresh capital and this much government support. Whether they compete on price, push harder into more advanced technology, or both, the comfortable setup they've enjoyed for decades is now being tested in a way it never has been before. And finally, this isn't happening in isolation. This company is just one piece of a much larger pattern. Other companies in the same country are pushing forward in related areas, all working toward the same broader goal of not depending on outside suppliers for the technology that keeps everything running. This IPO is really just one visible signal of a much bigger, quieter movement that's been building for years. For everyday people like you and me, this might feel distant, but it isn't. Chips are inside almost everything we touch. Our phones, our cars, our home devices, the servers running the apps we use every single day. More competition in this space could mean lower prices in the short run. But if one country ends up gaining too much control over such a critical piece of the global supply chain, it could also mean new risks down the road that we haven't even started thinking about yet. So here's the real question we're sitting with. Is this a genuine threat the rest of the world should be paying closer attention to? Or is this exactly the kind of competition that keeps big industries from getting too comfortable? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if this broke down something you hadn't thought about before, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.